We have our guest for our coverage of the End Bad Governance protests across Nigeria. Joining us now, Barrister Sam Kagbo will be talking to us and giving us his piece on everything that's been happening so far. Barrister, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
Good. So, sir, first off, let's ask what your take has been so far on the protests, now in its third day, with everything that has been recorded from Lagos to the north to everywhere in the country. Many tell about the fact that there might be waning support for the protest, while others claim that it is going on as planned. What's your take?
I've been indoors throughout, and I've only been able to follow up from the media, but in a word, I do not think it turned out as ominous as was predicted to be. And on the other hand, I do not also think that it is as successful as the planners had anticipated. So I think it's a midway, I think, for both parties, both the government and the planners of the protest. Both of them had their stories justified one way or the
other. Barrister Kagbo, I would let's talk about the demands, right, for the protest. You just said that it's been somewhat fair with the turnout, but also not as successful as you think that they'd hope for it to be successful. I mean, I would have loved to talk about why you think it's so successful, but that's definitely going to come for another time. But you are a member of a legal system and years into the legal system. And one of the demands of this hashtag End Bad Governance is the constitutional and judicial reforms, and to sponsor executive bill to the National Assembly to amend the constitution to allow for referendums. And also Nigerians want to vote on a new constitution, and the process of appointment and discipline of judges should be transparent. Now, we're going to focus on that the latter part of it, judicial reforms. If there were to be judicial reforms in Nigeria, what would that look like?
First and foremost, that would start with empowering the judiciary to have the capacity to perform and be effective in justice delivery. The other aspect of it that has been of a justifiable concern is the mode of recruitment. Of late. There is that obvious hijack of the process by the politicians, and the quality that is coming into the judiciary is of concern to practitioners, and I think for those who are actually calling for a reform in the appointment of judges and justices has to do with this hijack. But beyond that, to me as a lawyer, and I'm thankful that you have mentioned the fact that I've been a lawyer for a very long time, I would be a little bit circumspect in passing blames, if that's the word, because you can only give that which you have. The judiciary is overworked, but not so much empowered. When I mean empowered, they do not have the resources. It is just so good for us and convenient for us to say, oh, they have not been able to meet up the expectation of the public in justice delivery. But have we actually, as a public, paid attention to the conditions under which they are functioning? Not too many of us know that up to today, judges take proceedings in longhand. Things that other places have forgotten 10 years ago. They would still have to take the proceedings by writing, listening to you, and writing like a copy secretary. And that by itself is wearing out the personnel of the bench, and also one of the reasons for the delay in justice delivery. And we also have the compounding and confounding problem of electoral disputes taking over the entire man-hours of the judiciary. Up to this moment, there are still cases pending in court that have to do with what? The elections that have gone by a year ago. So we have to look at that, and I have had to say, both in writing and in forums like this, to say, let us create a constitutional government like our neighbors next door and most other countries. Those specialized courts would attend to political cases and leave mainstream litigation to the judiciary as we have it today. But as long as we have this dual role of the judges that we have, not too many of them, how many of them do you have? Take a look at Lagos. Lagos, I do not think they have up to 100 judges. And yet, in a year, sometimes they have up to over 10,000 cases to be heard and settled by human beings. Definitely, that is overburdening the personnel of the judiciary. So if we want to have effective justice delivery, we have to look at that. We cannot pretend that all is okay or fine when we know that it is not. How would you expect me to be comfortable when I, as a senior advocate, would advise somebody to say, go and settle, because if you take your case to the court, it might be there for another 10, 20 years. That is scandalous, but that is the reality. There is hardly any case outside the political cases today that can be heard, determined and settled finally within a space of, say, 2-3 years. No. It's going to take longer than that. And the three-tier system of resolving these cases, you finish at the High Court, you go to the Court of Appeal, you go to the Supreme Court, and on each of these tiers, you have delays. So that is concerning, and that should be looked at, definitely.
Mr. Kabo, I want us to touch on another point. Let's not go too far from the judiciary now. Let's talk about corruption and accountability. This is also one of the demands of the protesters to the Nigerian government. Given a country that has, a long history of decades of decay when it comes to corruption, and one that has always called for accountability of its governors or people who are in governance, it seems like a very big fit for the government. But what would the response to this demand from the government? What should it look like? What should it be?
Definitely, corruption is everywhere, and one of those concerning malice of the judiciary. But I've always had to say this: of the three arms of government, the better of them or the best of them, if that's the word, is the judiciary. But the judiciary should be one that should be above board. Of course, the members of the bench, the judicial officers, are from among us. If corruption is part of our DNA, philosophers, or what the psychologists call it, the collective unconscious, things that you inherit, the society gives to you as given. How would you now expect the people you draw from that corrupt society, that society that does not feel ill about corruption? You have your own brother, your own sister, your own mother, your father, your son, your daughter come in with a loot. That's what I would call it. And you are comfortable because what you are benefiting from it, definitely it's going to impact on what? The most sacred arm of government, which is what? The judiciary. There is never really any moment in the history of man that this concern has not been highlighted. Go to the Bible. Go to every society. Corruption within what we will now call the judiciary has always been of concern to the society. But there have been some moments in history where people attend to that better than we have today, because those society could link and connect and see a correlation between what? The quality of justice delivery and the quality of what? The individual. If indeed we have a very effective and one of integrity service delivery in the system, we might have been able to put the politicians in check. We might have been able to resolve some of this problem that these young men are going to the street for. But it is because the courts have not been effective in actually pulling down the excesses of politicians because of corruption. That is why you see them playing this godly, what would they call it now, attitude. So what am I saying? Yes, corruption is there, but I will come back to us. What are we doing about it? Don't we know about it? Don't we know those who are involved in corruption? Are we not the givers of the bribes? Are we not the one corrupting the system? We don't say anything. How many of us, when in your life have you seen a brother going to complain about what he sees untoward about his brother? We see people protecting their own. Our own thief is our own thief. Is our own. It is only when it is the other people's thief that you are going to town with. So what am I saying? We have to rehumanize ourselves. Until we rehumanize ourselves as people and as society and as a country, we're going to have this problem. And as long as this problem is there, deepening democracy will be difficult.
It's very interesting that you say this, Barrister Kabo, because I remember having a conversation with a dear friend yesterday, and that person said that we're all compromised, by corruption, and that we're all compromised, and we are also at risk of being corrupt. Even a child that is 10 years old or a child that is 1 year old can be corrupted because it is so ingrained in our society, and it is, social conditioning. And so you making a submission there, it just sort of, makes me recall that conversation from last night. But let me ask you, still on judiciary, right, and still on the judicial system, there has been talks, that, and critics and public analysts and those commentators, social commentators who are looking at the system have said repeatedly that this looks like a state capture with this current dispensation, and that the judiciary is compromised. And just recently, with the move by the Senate to increase the pay of judicial officers, this will also sort of increase this state capture that they are warning about. What is your take on this? Is this state capture? Is this compensating the judiciary to sort of capture them even more, or do they deserve a pay rise?
Go with the last one. they deserve a pay rise. They deserve to earn as much as the politicians in government are earning. They work harder than the legislators. They work harder than those in the executive, and they should be paid well.
But when they
there is hardly any country that I know where you have effective. I'm coming to this.
Okay.
I'm going to give you some examples. There's
Okay.
hardly any country where you have an effective judicial system where the judges do earn higher than public officers, even in some cases higher than the president. I have gone to Swaziland, and Swaziland is one of the countries in Africa with the least crime rate in Africa. And here is why. The police and the judicial officers are paid and well attended to, better than those in parliament and their ministers. That is the way it is there. I'm sure if you know what happens in America, you know what happens in the UK, you know that they earn more than the politicians because they work more than those people. And once you are a judge, you are what? Hived and corralled away from the society. You are not one that is supposed to do business. The politician can do business, you cannot. Your life and time, energy is meant to be what? Donated wholly and solely, 100% to the job. And if you are not well paid, you have children to go to school, you have a family to take care of. What creeps in? Temptation. So let them be paid well. What are we talking about here, in fact? If we go by that route, then it's dangerous. Why would a staff in NMPC earn 10 times what a judge earns? Why would an MPA worker earn more than a judge? And we don't call that state capture. To me, anybody who make that proposition, I think the person is unfair. And categorically, I would say that's a very dangerous narrative.
So then let me ask you, because we're pressed for time, very quickly, let me ask you, what then would be a decongestion of the judicial system? What then, how can we decluster the system so far that cases are gone through as quickly as possible? Let's not forget also the electoral part of it, where cases from the elections go to court. It takes a long time before judgment is passed. How can it be as seamless as possible, where there are no conflicting court orders, one person isn't running from this court to another, so much so that it is reformed in a way that is seamless? What would it look like?
Let's have specialized courts to attend to specific areas of the law, so that there would be what? Specialization and professionalism along those lines. That is key, and that is what very, 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 very necessary. Secondly, artificial intelligence has come in to help all of us in all of this. If you have a digitalized judicial system whereby whatever order or judgments you make in any part of Nigeria is online automatically and is accessible to every other judge, it becomes easier, so that before you make your judgment, you click in to see whether there has been any pending or there has already been a decision on this. I'm talking about now, I'm not talking about appellate court, because the appellate court system, you have the cases now accessible to all of us because of what? Tools like the Law Pavilion and its artificial intelligence. It makes it easier now. Those in the appellate court, they no longer have any excuse to have conflicting judgments. If they do, and like they've been having, that is concerning, because what? They no longer have that excuse. But The cases in the courts of first instance, the high court, they are not reported. So you will not know what your colleague in Abakaleke has decided, and you are in Kafachat. What do you do? You have a very brilliant, sweet-talking or persuasive lawyer comes and sway you, and you give a decision that is contradictory to what your brother has said. Meanwhile, the law is, and our judicial system says, once a court, that is the high court, all over Nigeria,
all right,
has made a decision.
Barrister, I want to say
that decision.
We are actually out of time this hour, but we've spent the most part of the hour with you and want to say thank you very much for joining us to give your take on the present state of things regarding the End Bad Governance protest. Thank you very much.